Written in the stars.
Animal test 6308. I can't keep my...
Alright, what's going on, guys? I went on vacation for 2 days and Genshin got drastically harder. Not only do we have the Energy Amplifier event, which is very similar to the Hypostatic Symphony event, but the Spiral Abyss reset is significantly more challenging than the past iteration, in my opinion. Team compositions and having the right characters built seems to be more important than ever. While some floors are still a DPS check, strategy is much more critical here compared to the previous Abyss, which was almost entirely a DPS check. If you don't have the right team put together to break shields, it doesn't matter how much DPS you can do. For those of you that care about the Abyss and at least gave it an attempt, how are you feeling about this reset and where are you struggling the most in getting 3 stars? Let me know down below. In this video, I want to provide some tips that helped me get through this Abyss with all 36 stars. It was not easy and it took quite a few attempts at these floors in order to put together the correct team and strategy for clearing in time. I had to go back through floor 11 once just to 3-star chamber 3 and put together separate teams to 3-star all chambers in floor 12. Looking back on it, I may have been able to strategize better from the start in my team compositions and will optimize for the next Abyss reset. I do have Hu Tao and Ganyu in my account, so I have some strong DPS units, but was able to get all 36 stars without Venti or Zhongli. That said, as you saw at the beginning of this video, I did end up caving and using my Eula Pity for Zhongli, as the game is pretty hard right now without 2 solid shield units, and I think he'll be an extremely strong addition to my account. This isn't going to be a complete guide, but I will summarize some of the most important things I learned during my first clear, and talk about the teams and general strategies that I used for each chamber that worked well for me. As always, there are many ways to clear Abyss, so I just want to share what worked for me. If you guys want a complete Abyss guide, let me know down in the comments and I can work on getting that together. Floor 11-1 is the new Protect the Monolith chamber, and it is significantly easier than the old Floor 11-2. Because this is the first chamber in Floor 11, you go in with your burst ready on each of your characters, which is extremely helpful and means you do not need to plan ahead on prior floors. I find the best characters for these stages to be Sucrose, Venti, and Zhongli for crowd control, and I personally think freeze comps shine in these floors as you do not need to counter shields. The general strategy is to go after the enemies attacking the monolith first, and without the Sisson Mage and Fatui Agent, it takes some time for these enemies to reduce the HP of the monolith, so with some crowd control and decent DPS, you shouldn't have too many problems. I was able to clear this easily on my first attempt without any knowledge of the enemy mechanics. If you're having trouble, I suggest looking up guides on enemy mechanics, as well as setting up teams specifically for this chamber and then redoing it with teams that are better for the later stages. Floor 11-2 is much less of a DPS check and more about shield breaking and putting together the correct teams. Generally, you want to go after the Hydro Gunner on each half first since he can heal all the other enemies. For both halves, Cryo characters will be very strong for breaking the Electro Fatui Skirmishers' shields. I found that Cryo against the Hydro Gunners is generally pretty effective and did not need an Electro unit here myself, but if you're having trouble, I'd bring someone like Fischl or Beto to deal with him. Animo units are also great here. Because the Fatui Skirmishers have inherent debuffs, we can break the Hydro Gunner's shield using Swirl with a nearby Electro Skirmisher. In the second half, you'll want either a Geo character or an Overload comp to deal with the Geo shield. During my first attempt, I just used Ganyu to DPS right through the shield, but in my second attempt, I was able to break the shield using a team consisting of Hu Tao and Beto. Chamber 3 is by far the hardest chamber in Floor 11 and is on par with Floor 12. I didn't find it too difficult to clear with 2 stars, but 3 stars was very tough. The first half is straightforward. You really just need to deal with the Cryo Sisson Mage's shields, which are easily combated with Pyro. My goal for this half was to complete in about 45 seconds, as the second half takes considerably longer. The Cryo Mages shield up quickly, so try to take them out as quickly as possible with an AoE attack like Hu Tao's Burst, or you'll have to spend a lot of time chasing them down and breaking through their shields. Also, Sucrose and Venti are very good here for grouping the 3 together and avoiding wasting time chasing them down. The second half is kind of a nightmare. If you have Zhongli, I'd strongly recommend using him here to avoid constant disruption from the Abyss Herald's attacks. These also hit extremely hard. Additionally, taunts such as Ganyu's and Mona's skill are useful for short periods of avoiding disruption and getting off damage. When the Abyss Heralds shield up, they get the Hydro debuff, meaning that they will freeze with Cryo application. Because of this, Cryo is very strong here, but any Hydro reactions can be used to break their shields. My goal was to get both enemies to the HP threshold required for them to shield up first, and then try to get them grouped together to start breaking their shields. Before I say my ults for this phase, I struggled quite a bit. Their shields are very heavy and require a lot of elemental application to break. In the last phase, all you're trying to do is break their shields, and so DPS no longer matters, meaning you can even use characters like Diona for her charge shot very effectively. Chongyun will also be very strong here by infusing your melee carry's attacks with Cryo, which will not only keep the enemies frozen, but allow you to break shields more quickly. Units like Rosaria, Xiangling, Ganyu, Beidou, and Diona, who can leave their burst on the field, and whose burst repeatedly applies elemental debuffs, will definitely aid in the amount of time it takes to break through the Abyss Herald shields. So on top of the enemies in floor 11, we're also dealing with the slowing water debuff, which increases your cooldown duration by 150%. If you use your elemental skill while the Hydro debuff is applied, this cooldown increase will be active. But if you're inflicted with the Hydro debuff while your skill is in its cooldown, the duration will not change. This means that in general, you want to time your skills to be outside of the slowing water application. You can remove slowing water using cleanses from Jean, Bennett, and Xinyan. You can also rely on characters who are not heavily skill dependent to combat this, such as Ganyu with charge shots, or physical damage carries like Razor and Keqing. I did not bring a character that could cleanse on my Ganyu team because she does almost all of her damage with her charge shots. Okay, so let's move on to floor 12. Floor 12, Chamber 1 is very straightforward and similar to the previous floor 12-1. You can really bring any teams here you want, but do note that you'll get faster clear times if you bring a Hydro unit to break the Pyro Whopper Flower shield on the first half, and a Pyro unit for the Cryo Whopper Flower shields on the second half. Otherwise, this is just a DPS and survival check. Make use of iframes here to avoid taking damage and maximize DPS output. Floor 12, Chamber 2 is significantly harder and completely different than the last Abyss rotation. In the first half, there are no shields or immunities, and the challenge here is clearing as fast as possible. There are a large number of treasure hoarders and Sisson flies, and they're very spread out. I'd bring an Animo unit like Venti or Sucrose to group enemies, as well as characters that can deal large AoE damage to cut down on the time. Sucrose's ult worked well for me, as well as Hu Tao's burst for taking out the flies quicker. Venti will shine here, and any character with AoE burst damage or locking ranged ability like Ningguang will be great for taking out the flies. My goal here was about a 1 minute and 30 second clear time. The second half is tough and the enemies hit extremely hard, so shields are pretty essential. I used Diona for shielding and healing, and also brought a freeze comp consisting of 3 cryo units, which were Ganyu, Rosaria, and Diona, with Mona for her taunt and damage buff. Keeping the enemies frozen allowed for pretty safe play. Alternatively, you could run Zhongli with a Pyro DPS unit to get off more damage. Shielding will just be a lot more critical if you're not running a freeze comp, so Zhongli will be pretty essential here. Okay, so as far as floor 12 as a whole goes, the second half of 12-2 and the first half of 12-3 definitely gave me the most trouble. I finally had success with the first half of floor 12 using Hu Tao, Xingqiu, Rosaria, and Diona. In order to break the Electro Abyss Lecter's shields, we need to perform a large number of elemental reactions because they are very tanky. The best elements to bring will be Cryo and Pyro. Xingqiu was only in my team for the initial vape damage before they shielded up, as well as for some damage mitigation. It is pretty essential to group these two enemies in order to clear this with enough time for the second half remaining. My general approach was to continue swapping between the outside of the two characters and slowly knock them together with normal and charge attacks. You're going to want to continue to circle around them with your attacks to keep them as close as possible and hit both enemies with your abilities. At some point during this run they did get split up, but because I was making good time, I focused on a single enemy at this point before moving to the second one. The main thing to watch out for here are the balls that they attack with, as these will drain your energy. All the other attacks will just do damage. The only way I could clear fast enough was to tank all of this damage. Bennett will be another excellent Pyro character here who can spam his elemental skill, especially within his burst radius. You're going to need a decent amount of healing and or shielding to avoid excessively dodging all of the attacks that the Lecters give out. The second half is fairly straightforward. Here, Venti and Sucrose are excellent for grouping all the enemies together, otherwise you'll be chasing them all over the map and you'll lose out on a ton of DPS as well as time. I brought both Sucrose and Jean in order to spam Sucrose's burst more frequently. Xiangling is here to deal with the Cryo Abyss Mage's shield and for burst damage, and Ganyu is here mostly to spam her burst and finish everyone off. Once I threw in some Animo units, this stage became pretty easy. I didn't want to make this video too long, but did want to share some of the things that helped me with this very challenging Abyss reset. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll try to answer you, or hop onto the Discord server. We have some very friendly and helpful people there, and I often pop in to chat as well. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Please leave a like if you did, as it really helps out the channel, and if you'd like to see more Genshin content like this, please consider subscribing down below. I put out Genshin videos just like this one every single week. I'll see you soon for the next video. Peace.